By late 1943, the world was waiting for one moment, the liberation of Europe. Nazi Germany had occupied the continent for nearly 4 years, and millions lived under terror and oppression. The Allies had defeated the Axis in North Africa and were advancing through Italy, but the heart of Hitler's empire, Western Europe, remained in chains. To free it, the Allies would need to do something no army in history had ever done: invade a continent across the sea. This was the birth of Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion ever planned. Its goal was clear: to land hundreds of thousands of troops on the coast of France, establish a beachhead, and begin the long march to Berlin. But turning that idea into reality was anything but simple. The man chosen to command the operation was General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Calm, diplomatic, and respected by allies from every nation, Eisenhower had proven his leadership in North Africa and Italy. Now, he carried an impossible burden: to unite British, American, Canadian, and Free French forces under a single command and lead them into the most dangerous operation of the war. The planning began in earnest in early 1944. At the time, Hitler's forces still controlled most of Western Europe. The Atlantic coast was heavily fortified, a line of defenses known as the Atlantic Wall. Stretching nearly 2,400 miles from Norway to the border of Spain, it was a fortress of concrete, steel, barbed wire, and millions of mines. Behind it stood more than 50 German divisions, battle-hardened troops who had spent years defending Hitler's conquests. The question facing the Allies was simple, yet terrifying: where should they land? For months, strategists debated the target. The most obvious choice was Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point across the English Channel and the closest route from Britain to France. But it was also the most heavily defended. Any invasion there would almost certainly fail. Instead, Allied planners chose Normandy, a region of beaches, cliffs, and small coastal towns about 150 miles west of Calais. The terrain was risky, but it offered an element of surprise. Still, success would depend on more than surprise. It required secrecy. If the Germans discovered where or when the invasion would happen, the Allies would be destroyed before reaching the shore. To protect the plan, the Allies launched one of the most elaborate deception operations in history, Operation Bodyguard. Through fake radio traffic, dummy equipment, and misinformation fed by double agents, they convinced Hitler that the invasion would strike Calais, not Normandy. Entire phantom armies were created on maps. Inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, and fake camps were built across southeastern England. Even General George S. Patton, the charismatic American commander, was placed in charge of this fictitious army, the first U.S. Army group, to lend credibility to the ruse. The deception worked perfectly. When D-Day came, the Germans kept their strongest forces waiting at Calais, expecting the real invasion that never came. While spies and codebreakers waged their secret war, engineers and soldiers prepared for the physical one. The logistics of Operation Overlord were staggering. The invasion would require more than 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, and 150,000 troops on the first day alone. Millions of tons of equipment had to be built, stored, and transported: tanks, trucks, landing craft, ammunition, fuel, food, and medical supplies. British factories worked day and night, producing specialized vehicles known as Hobart's Funnies, tanks designed for unique tasks like clearing mines, launching bridges, or flailing through barbed wire. Engineers constructed mulberry harbors, massive artificial ports that could be towed across the channel and assembled off the beaches to unload supplies. Underwater pipelines called Pluto, or pipeline under the ocean, were laid to carry fuel directly from Britain to France. Every detail had to be perfect, from the timing of the tides to the strength of the moonlight. Weather forecasters studied wind and wave patterns across the channel, knowing that a single storm could destroy the invasion fleet. The operation depended on precision, secrecy, and courage. By the spring of 1944, Britain had become one massive military camp. Every road, port, and airfield was filled with soldiers, tanks, and trucks. American GIs trained alongside British and Canadian troops, rehearsing landings on English beaches that resembled those of Normandy. Airborne divisions practiced night drops behind enemy lines. Naval crews drilled for days, learning to load and unload men and equipment with clockwork accuracy. Meanwhile, resistance fighters in France were preparing, too. The French resistance, working closely with British intelligence, mapped German fortifications, sabotaged railways, and gathered vital information about enemy troop movements. Their reports would prove crucial in the days to come. But as the final weeks before D-Day approached, tension reached its peak. Everyone involved knew the stakes. If the invasion failed, the Allies might not have another chance for years, and Nazi Germany could strengthen its grip on Europe. Eisenhower's staff faced one last challenge: the weather. In early June, storms swept across the English Channel, making an invasion impossible. The massive fleet, already loaded with men and supplies, sat waiting in British ports. For days, commanders watched the skies, waiting for a break. On June 4th, the invasion was postponed. Then, late on June 5th, the weather briefly cleared. Meteorologist James Stagg, head of the Allied weather team, reported a short window of opportunity. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best chance. Eisenhower weighed the decision carefully. Every general in the room knew the risks. If the weather worsened mid-crossing, thousands could drown before even reaching the beaches. After a long silence, Eisenhower made the call: "Okay, let's go." In that moment, Operation Overlord was set in motion. Across southern England, soldiers received the final briefing. The date was fixed: June 6, 1944, D-Day. That night, as rain fell and winds howled outside, Eisenhower visited some of the paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division. Dressed in their jump gear, faces blackened, they were about to board their planes for the first wave of the invasion. Eisenhower shook their hands and wished them luck. One soldier remembered him saying simply, "Full victory, nothing else." Behind that calm confidence, Eisenhower carried a secret letter, one he had written in case the invasion failed. In it, he took full responsibility, writing, "If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." As midnight approached, thousands of aircraft roared into the skies, carrying paratroopers toward Normandy. Below them, the greatest armada the world had ever seen began to move, 5,000 ships and landing craft stretching across the dark waters of the Channel. On the French coast, German commanders remained unsure. Reports of Allied activity reached them, but most believed it was just another drill. Even Hitler refused to be woken when the first paratroopers began landing behind the beaches. He still thought the real invasion would come at Calais. In England, church bells rang. Civilians watched from the cliffs as the fleet disappeared into the mist. For the men aboard those ships, there was no turning back. Operation Overlord, months of planning, deception, and sacrifice, was finally underway. In a few hours, the fate of Europe would be decided not in war rooms or strategy papers, but on the cold sands of Normandy, under fire, blood, and chaos. The impossible had been planned. Now, it had to be won.